Just followed the directions that I could get from the internet and from other sources, and then came here and started walking around till I got enough information from people to choose that particular hostel, which ironically is the first on my list anyway. I'm going to walk back out of town the way I came on the tuk-tuk. This is our first arch going back out of town. Old parrot so jammed into this cage hardly has room to stand up. The other side of it. It's supposed to be a cute little laid-back village, so we'll explore it for the next couple of days. Who knows what this old building used to be, but it was probably quite pretty and maybe even an impressive edifice in its time. Down there, the second arch we'll go through. Books are everywhere, and usually a good sign. Either they're for sale or they're stacked there for building or rebuilding something. It's interesting, and cows and children shrink away from me in fear, which is curious. The remains of a temple on the east side of Orccha as I walk down the main drag. And I know you're getting tired of hearing the line, just imagine what it was like in the day. But seriously, look at some of the items, the niches. There's 2 rows. Notice the top ones have the more detailed, I think a Muslim type of arch top. And then that hole in the corner, who knows what that's for. And then those buttresses, did it once have some kind of roof line there? Was it painted? Was the dome painted? Was there something up on top of that dome, like some brass device that we've seen on a brass pole? It's a partial hint to my question. Perhaps there was some kind of walkway up there, like this is. This is laid back, then I hope that I can do some wandering and find some things like, what are those 2 temple gorpuras, or gorpurums I think they're called, sticking up, and what kind of nice walk can we enjoy getting there. This temple is haunting for another reason. If in fact it's a temple, it may just be the corner of a large fort or palace, as that wall suggests, extending off to the right. These, what I guess are bird nests, might have been what we saw flapping against that branch or tree. What kind of bird makes these nests, I don't know. I know orioles make such hanging nests, but don't know about this country. The farmer's hung out the laundry, or his wife has. And there beyond, I'll go into it, is some other kind of structure we may get to wander over to. There's some kind of shrine as I shift from the end of an asphalt or a cement street to a dirt one. A bush with some flowers on that I am relishing as I try to find some tranquility from the chaos of the cities I've been in. Certainly the villagers and their farms is the other half of India. A half that as tourists we seldom see. We're getting closer. Notice the almost full-sized scarecrow in that field. Apparently it works. I'm going to sidetrack to the left from my search for those 2 temples to go look at this structure over here. I've noticed as I've come from Agralar down here to Jhansi and then to Orccha, is that the landscape has changed into this rolling hill pattern, which I'm sure is an erosion dynamic from some source. It's interesting to see this stone wall here, in part composed of large stones filled in with small, and then above where that building is that we're trying to get to, a far more finished and cement wall. It may well be that the monsoon rains just literally wear down this landscape in this fashion. These branches on this wall suggest that it's a farmer's wall designed to keep livestock either in or out relative to where I am. This is interesting. Just outside this wall, notice this wall once had a design that included probably flowers, that sort of thing. All have been part of an existing set of buildings. You can see the outline here. This a long corridor in front, and probably fronting this. Maybe it was, if this were a wealthy person's home, this might have been a building for servants as well as craft shops. This is probably a cistern, but I have no way to know. As part of the next wall around the corner of the wall I was walking on, it seems to have the same layout of potential foundations. We'll continue our walk around. Now on the third side, have not seen an access yet, stairway. You wonder again if this was all painted. These walls in pretty good shape. You can see a whitish color over here, which certainly suggests it was painted, but were there more colors used? Different kind of monkey than you saw earlier. This third side has the same apparent layout. This is a little bit different. The dimensions change. See a little more of this layout. I'm walking on a grade with the stones, but you can see that that grade falls off. Now, that wall looks pretty rough in there, suggesting that at one time maybe it was never intended to be seen. And yet down here we have the same rectangles. But yet no way to get in. We'll go back and look at the first side. That's the one over there. See if I missed it. Didn't miss it. There's no way in that I can see. Wait. Second side had it. I just didn't see it. Has to be a shrine of some sort. But why the hole? Could it have been some kind of monastery? Little remnant of color and design left. Some red color, as well as that. Maybe a base beige. And why the hole? Here, there's plaster on top of the paint. The town of Orccha has two at least great edifices. We can see one off to the right and then one or two off to the left there. There are at least that many palaces here. The normal attraction for normal people. Notice that the eaves and their supports, as well as the lines, the horizontal lines that separate some of the levels, are of a red sandstone. In reflection, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if this complex was a monastery and that the grounds surrounding it beyond our view were where they raised crops and animals to survive with. Certainly those lands that are being used now might have been used then. But what was this curious structure for? An allusion to a lingus stone? This is interesting. On the outside of the wall, down in this area, there is this oven shape that goes all the way through underneath that grade that holds the temple. Look closer, this wall is not just a square. Notice this looks rounded, turret-like, and that's rounded there, another rounded there, all across this face. So what's up with that? As we near this church or temple, I heard the river, and here it is. I knew there was one, didn't know exactly where it was. There, a large grebe. This temple has all the earmarks of a fortress, but since its palaces and fortresses and temples are often one complex. Maybe it's that. The question is, can I get at it? How pretty this river looks. I just saw one of those brilliant turquoise kingfishers, I believe they are. He flew up to our right, so since that's the way I have to go, we'll see if we can encounter him again. And there he is. The brilliance is when he flies. So to get to this complex, I'm going to have to somehow find a way to cross this slough. And to my right is farmers' land, so I can't go wandering into that. More pretty flowers on what I think is a plant that has little hooks on it. Can't tell how far it goes to the right, but you can see in the distance to the right and above that scarecrow that, and even further, that there's substantial monuments of some sort over there, structures at least. Trees you may be able to make out just to the left of that white building. I'll call it the monastery temple we were at. And I'll pan about, not only to show you this landscape in this small town, but also this wall, which pretty much points in that direction. And it's a similar shape and design of the wall that we see. Could it somehow be part of the dimension, the boundary of that, whatever it is, monastery? Something unique I ran across. This bag full of some kind of fluid. What it looks like is the smooth surface of a pot. But it looks from these stones like someone has carefully cleaned it out. What could it be? Were I to guess in the southwest, I would say it was a water still. But they're right next to a river. That makes no sense. One of the problems with these small plot farming units is that you can not get any profitable productivity out of them because they're so small, particularly as their children move away and there's fewer farmers to actually work the land. It's the catch-22 of the farmer. Educate your kids and someday render yourself as a farmer inoperable. I don't know what this grassy crop to the right is, but over to the left are the specialty crops. Don't know what those are for sure, but it could be anything: broccoli, carrots, onions. Those men are digging out something, and I think that may be a pile of bricks there, so maybe they're putting in something to provide more water control. But notice that there's the wall of that complex across that wash. So it continues even farther down to the right. A little hint of the past, you could see it in the detail. And we can peer inside where things seem, I think, quite simple. A piece remains of this old building, this probable temple, and our second gate. They would have existed perhaps at the same time. How many different forms of stone walls have I seen? Different designs. How Anasazi like this one to live in their own junkyard, literally. Working on their schoolwork out there on a blanket from this little building that is their home, I'm sure. A nice clean area I'm walking through, and everywhere the people say hello, and I say hello, namaste, and then I say hello in English so the kids can respond. And then we have a little, very short conversation, but exuberant with pleasure and respect on their part and mine. Or what anybody says, these things are big. Look, a new complex, my bet is it's a hotel of some sort. Could be wrong. I call everything a temple if it has domes on it. But it may have been a palace. Here's a frolicking little guy. And he's tethered for some reason. He was tethered. Like the foundation for a building. This was dug with a backhoe. Notice the layer of trash. This gives you a hint of India today. This was an ancient haveli, a home. Who'd have figured? See just a little bit of it in those doorways that remain. Let's walk down and look at the rest of the building. See on the sides the outlines of, if not structures, detail, but those walls stubs suggest some structure. This is the haveli went from up there where those towers are, down including here, and probably including that wall. And you can see some stub walls and archways there. And then, who knows if it went farther, maybe a portion of this wall was part of its wall. Maybe what some of those temples in the yellow city were supposed to look like, or the pink city. In pink, this kind of vibrant and yet strong color. Toilet fixtures wrapped in straw. Now notice right in the foreground a fortress type wall or a palace type wall, so who knows what that complex is. We'll discover it as we move a little further on. That umbrella suggests a temple, but whether this side is the inside or the outside, I don't know, but we'll see if we can go in through here. I guess it's some kind of a market. Access, maybe we can get in, maybe we can't. This is a very pretty place, or at least it was, with all of these lowered flower gardens, and those smaller circular areas probably held fountains. In fact, I can see one back in the day. Once there were columns here, so this area here would have all been columned and fountained. Those were part of the water system that by gravity drained into these areas and then probably out of these areas into the bigger areas. As you can see, there are at least 4 ways water can get into these bigger areas. Interesting, here's some gardening going on. It's optimistic. That detail, the reverse of what we see on the top of walls. All 4 quadrants were one of these raised, long, fountained pools. An area outside the garden, but yet another garden, and beautifully maintained. Well, it's the first time I've seen a large bowl like this, but that looks very mosque-like for some reason. Looking at the opposite corner of what we first filmed, wondering what these 2 towers are for. Notice they don't appear to have any balcony on them like a Muslim tower for calling out prayers. They do have holes, whether those were for floors or not, I don't know. And just on the other side of this wall is where we would have been a few moments ago when we were inside. We were beyond that wall, so this was something separate right here, down at this end. But what's interesting is at the very end here is another very pretty little park. Nicely maintained, but basically, and probably logically, inaccessible. Some very pretty flowers in there. So here's the other side. I'm now at the opposite kitty corner. to the first corner of the building I videoed from, so you can see what that was. I'm sure this was a palace, and I don't know what this was here, but it's been beautifully repainted. I mean, it's such a standout when it happens in India. Apparently this is part of it down here, as well as that little thing that we'll take a look at. Of course, this is one of the big palaces, I guess, that we'll take a look at. Now this is very castle-like, isn't it? Hard to imagine that this is a palace. I just have to think that it's something to do with a temple, because this sure looks like what I've seen as temples. Well, it's just a very beautiful fountain. Maybe it goes off once in a while. There's water, a little bit of water in it, but mainly trash. Guesses from the looks of these new tile work on the floor and the paint and so forth, and the location between this, whatever it is, and that, whatever it is, and that we have just seen, may have been either the last or the first gasp of effort to make this into a very tourist pleasant place. Now it's kind of iffy, but it's getting there, particularly with this beautiful garden here. This is the entry gate. Pretty now. I wonder if they chose the same colors that were used originally. And here was another sub-gate here. These were cosmetic colors that you just saw. Brilliant colors, aren't they? Colored jeweled things are what you keep a particular color in.